Alright everyone, we start off today with lies, damn lies, and statistics. Of course, we're talking about political polling. As we move through the last week and a half, actually, of this year, technically in about 10 days, the midterms start. And so polling is relatively important. I've seen multiple abnormalities fairly recently in Biden's approval polling. You see it elsewhere too, but it seems specially targeted towards this. And it's inevitably an attempt, I think, to inflate his polling numbers. Now, link in the description, archived, of course. Right now, it's going back away from that attempted skew. The problem, I think, for the legacy media groups that are engaged in this is they only control a few of the polling firms, apparently. The problem is methodology related. Even if, by the way, it's not an attempt to skew anything, the mere fact that some of these polling firms are being aggregated at this point is goddamn laughable. And keep in mind, RCP's better than any of the others. Like, Nate Silver was a flash in the pan long ago, in what was it, 2012 or some shit. And then he thought he was big kahuna. But really, RCP's aggregate is better. It's more comprehensive, and also they've got a news aggregation capability on their site, so you should use them. But I'm going to take you through this. First and foremost, though, before I dig into a few of these numbers and explain why some of them are wonky and shouldn't be aggregated in his approval, which has now recorrected itself, or his disapproval rather has. The approval's lagging behind at the moment. Keep in mind, there will be a pinned comment down below if you're watching this video on YouTube. I make several exclusive videos most days, and at least one exclusive almost every day on those platforms that does not go on YouTube. Today it'll be one, the one that I couldn't get to yesterday because Cat kept interrupting me, so I had to hold it over because I also have a literary update and an occult video. So it's a special spooky occult day on the solstice. By the way, happy solstice to everyone. Yule approacheth. Get the wine ready, get the mushrooms. Oh wait, the stores are all closed. Screw you. Anyway, if I look at this, if you look at the polls that are being aggregated right now, you've got a fairly accurate picture of Biden's approval and disapproval with a gap of 8 points, which is similar to what it has been since, actually, let me check here. No, I can't actually. Since around the early part of October, though. Of November. It's been that way fairly steadily. But you saw over the last week or so his disapproval dropped considerably by several points. It was the actual gap between disapproval and approval had fallen below 7 points for the first time in several months. And I said at the time, I pointed this out on Twitter, that the aggregate was being dragged by bad polling. Specifically, there are two things that I see here active within the current aggregate, and also during the last period there were two other polling firms doing one of these things. That's why it appeared that his disapproval was decreasing. Two problems. First, look at the Reuters poll. What letter do you see after the sample size? An A. I've warned people of this. Ignore polls that have an A after them. These are polls of adults. RV means registered voters. These people are already registered. It's confirmed that they're at least able to vote. LV means likely voters. The assumption is generally that means they're also registered. Those two numbers are perfectly fine. What's the problem with aggregating all adults? The person you've called may not intend to vote. They may want to vote, maybe kinda, but they're not registered to vote. That's going to be a bit of a problem. It could be they're a felon. They're not able to vote. It could be that maybe they plan to vote, but actually they're illegal. So you're asking someone about their political opinions, and you haven't even confirmed that they're a voter. You could be talking to an expat from Spain on the phone. You have no way of knowing. You haven't asked them that question. Now, people can lie on polls. Most people don't, though. And so if you have that original stopgap of, hey, are you a registered voter? Or, hey, are you likely to vote in the upcoming election? You've eliminated a significant amount of potential bad data. Therefore, polls of all adults are meaningless. You've got too much of a potential skew in that sample. And lo and behold, when you don't fix for whether people are registered, this is something that's happening on a national level, which is why it makes sense there'd be this discrepancy. If you look at the numbers with A after them versus RV, Biden always benefits significantly if only adults are asked. This is possibly due to the massive surge in registration among Republicans and deregistration among Democrats. A significant proportion of both Republicans and Democrats have devolved into independents now. But it's far worse among Democrats. They've lost most of their edge over the GOP in terms of registration, to the point where Florida has flipped in the GOP's favor. Florida, in the next election, barring a miracle, will almost automatically go Republican, while the Democrats manage to eke it out in Georgia, probably. So we're seeing the paradigm shift continue. I told people that this would be happening. It didn't end with 2012 or with 2016 like some people thought. In the last polling period, though, you have 2 additional polls that were only of adults, and they both showed a statistical tie between approval and disapproval. Only polls in the period, other than, again, the other poll from Reuters that's still on the aggregate, that use that methodology. In all 3 cases, they showed sunny numbers for Joe Biden. There's one other poll on here that also probably shouldn't be aggregated. Now, this one shows a milder than normal approval gap. It shows a 4-point gap. That is, the disapproval's 4 points higher, and that's CNN. What do you notice with CNN? They've polled registered voters, but they haven't listed the sample size. I don't know why that is, but apparently CNN doesn't release its sample sizes in its polling. Why specifically would you then assume that CNN was a reliable source of polling data? Well, clearly it's not. And considering that CNN has openly and avowedly now bragged for the last week about taking marching orders from Joe Biden on economic news, to spin it and make it sound like the economy ain't as bad as it actually is, as Kamala Harris I'm sure would use her twang on, is it really a stretch to believe that they're manipulating poll results? Oh yeah, we just kept sampling until we got the number we wanted. We just don't have to give out the sampling total. Yeah, they've got infinite money to spend on it. That's a parent company's massive globalist front of goofballs. They can pour $1 billion into it if they want to swing polls. It's all an attempt to make Biden look less unpopular. If you're doing that with the economy, why wouldn't you do it with the approval polling? It would make sense now, wouldn't it? Now, if you look at several of the other recent polls, it looks like his disapproval hasn't really moved. But during that statistical period, simply because you had more than one poll with that A as the sample, simply because you had 3 at the same time, it skewed the data by 2 points. This is lies, damn lies, and statistics, and you have to be very, very careful when you look through this data. You need to know at least the basics of sample size, what that means, margin of errors. You need to understand the basic premise of that. It's not the same with any 2 polls. The methodology. Does it poll landlines? Does it poll cell phones? Does it poll by email? Does it use an email list? If so, which one? And then what is this? Is there any screening on the sample? If it's just of adults, the poll means nothing to me. And if I take those polls out of the aggregate, number 1, you saw no drop in his disapproval, which comports to the basic observable reality. There's nothing that happened recently that would result in a 2-point steep drop while the approval rose back up a couple of points. No accomplishment, no major foible or fumble from his adversaries, so it never made sense that that number would change that significantly. It's statistical noise. And so if you fix for that, you see a relatively straight line. And now his disapproval beginning to inch upwards again. Possibly due in part to economic news. He's trying to fearmonger about COVID again. The double-edged sword is that you can convince some people to get vaccinated by saying that they're going to face a dark, dreary winter of death and crippling pain. But then it makes it sound like you don't have a lid on COVID. When that's the only issue on which you get reasonably good marks, and even then a few points below water in polling now, originally had quite high approval among people for his COVID response, now that more people have died under him than died under Trump in a shorter period of time, now that you have a new variant, now that you have all these other problems, people are beginning to sour on the approach of just blaming the unvaccinated. So Biden is desperate, and he knows there's no reason to believe the case totals until they start changing the methodology, hint, hint, will begin to decrease. The deaths might, but he still reigned over more deaths, and there are still a lot more cases because Omicron is so transmissible. If that starts taking attrition on him in addition to the economy and in addition to the border crisis, it's going to be a goddamn wash in the midterms. I'm not surprised that he's sucking the cock of legacy media corporations to get positive coverage that he doesn't deserve. So keep in mind, there is probably push polling going on here, and even if there's not, there is a missampling, a flawed methodology that no reasonable, serious polling firm would use. Why are you even bothering to aggregate this? These results shouldn't even appear on RCP. Reuters and CNN should arguably be kicked off the aggregate for the fact that they don't poll the right groups of people, and in CNN's case, it isn't even directly forthcoming about how many people they polled. Well, it could be 500 or it could be 5,000. This significantly changes the margin of error. I believe that that's probably shenanigans in CNN's case. With Reuters, it's just a missampling, I think. The problem is, of course, if they're in that sampling period and they're using that flawed methodology, it's automatically going to change the outcome in the final numbers. That's about all. Peace out.